Everyone, welcome to the Aliyah Day. So glad to be with you this morning as we are studying the third reading of parasha Mikeitz, which I trust is going to be an exciting and exhilarating study as we are continuing to look at the life of Yosef and to bring it into understanding of the life of Messiah Yeshua, Baruch Hashem. So, again, glad you're here. If you are new among us, then we welcome you. We're so glad that you are with us. And we would like to have you sign, to, I guess you could sign. You could click the like little button there. You could share this video with all of your friends and all of your precious family and invite them to be part of the Aliyah Day. So again, welcome. Very glad you're here. If you have the Art Scroll Chumash, we are going to be finding ourselves on page 229 as we start the third reading, which is going to be in chapter 41, beginning in verse 39. So let's read and get right to our insights because there's quite a lot to share. I have at least 4 or 5 books open here. Things I would like to bring down today if we can get time to do that. So one sip of coffee. And then we read. Then Pharaoh said to Yosef, since God has informed you of all this, there can be no one so discerning and wise as you. So we read yesterday that Pharaoh had a dream. Yosef had a dream. Pharaoh had a dream. Everybody's dreaming. It's California dreaming. They must be in California. California dreaming, and they invite Yosef to come. The king invites Yosef to come and, interpret the dreams. So he does, and he says, listen, no one else was able to do that. So I called in all my big guys. I called in all the high-powered lawyers, all the high-powered scientists. I called in all the philosophers. Nobody could interpret it, only you. So Pharaoh said to Yosef, since God has informed you of all this, can there be there can be no one so discerning and wise as you. My wife and daughter say that about me all the time. And it says in verse 40, you shall be in charge of my palace, and by your command shall all people be sustained. Only by the throne shall I outrank you. It says in verse 41, verso 4:1, Pharaoh dice a Yosef, see, I have placed you in charge of all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh removed his ring from his hand and put it on Yosef's hand. He then had him dressed in garments of fine linen, and he placed a gold chain upon his neck. He also had him ride in his second royal chariot. That's Air Force Two. And they proclaimed before him, Avrech. Now, this word avrech has a lot of interesting meaning. So we're going to come back to that in just a second. It says, thus he appointed him over all the land of Egypt. Verse 44, Pharaoh said to Yosef, I am Pharaoh, and without you no man may lift up his hand or foot in the land of Egypt. Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphanath Paneah. That's also a very important point we want to come back to in just a second. And he gave him Asenath, daughter of Potiphera, chief of On, for a wife. Now, we're going to learn about Asenath and who Asenath is. We're going to learn her identity. It was also an interesting story. And it shares some possible prophetic insight to the Mashiach as well, of course. So it says, thus, Yosef emerged in charge of the land of Mitzrayim, that is Egypt. Now, Yosef was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. As I said yesterday, very, very interesting that we have to follow a pattern. I've been hopefully you've been paying attention, and I've been teaching you about following the pattern. And the pattern here is that when this Mashiach figure begins his ministry, as it were. He begins his ministry at 30 years old. That is also the age that tradition tells us that the Messiah Yeshua began his ministry, also at the age of 30 años. For our Sephardic Jews out there, 30 years. Yosef left Pharaoh's presence and he passed through the entire land of Egypt. The earth produced during the 7 years of abundance by the handfuls. He gathered all the food of the 7 years that came to pass in the land of Mitzrayim, and he placed food in the cities. The food of the fields around each city he placed within it. And Yosef amassed grain like the sand of the sea in great abundance until he ceased counting, for there was no number. Now, to Yosef were born 2 sons. When the year of famine had not set in, whom Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, chief of On, bore to him, Yosef called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God had made him forget all his hardships and all my father's household. The name of the second he called Ephraim, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. I want to say something here that just as an encouragement, because we have Yosef, who has now been made viceroy. He's been made the czar, the secondary king, if you will, of the most powerful empire on the face of the earth at this time. Basically, the whole world. And yet, nobody knows really that he's Jewish. Nobody knows really so much his background. As far as they're concerned, he's a Gentile. He's got a Gentile name, Saphanath Paneah. So they don't know his real name. They don't know that his name is Yosef. And he marries a nice lady, and they have 2 children. And in the entire nation, the entire empire of Egypt, amongst all the idolatry, amongst all the idolatrous festivals, every time they went to the store to shop, they heard the festival music over the loudspeaker. When they went down to downtown Cairo to the big Sam's Club there, it was blaring on the speaker, all the festival music, all the time. They had lots of gods, so they had lots of festivals. And they were the only family looking for certified kosher. When they went shopping, they were the only family in the entire nation, the entire empire of Egypt, looking for certified kosher food, looking for a hechsher. Only ones. I want you to think about that for a moment, because many times we get discouraged in our mitzvah keeping that, you know, we might be in our little hamlets, wherever those are, New Hampshire, California, Florida, South Africa, India, Germany, France, the United Kingdom, Scotland, are all various places. And we think, I'm the only one. Well, so was Yosef, the savior of the world. He was the only one. He and his wife and his 2 kids. That was it. Nobody else. And the reality is, he didn't have a congregation. He didn't have people to whom he was connected that were encouraging and supporting. So just understand, we have to be thankful. Just an encouragement. Now, I want to come back. I want to go ahead and start with this word avrech. We'll start there. Yeah, they had Sam's Club in Egypt because the Costco didn't come along yet. So it says here, and they proclaimed before him avrek. It says, as Yosef rode on the chariot, the servants called out before him avrek, which is a composite of 2 words. The first is Av. This is very interesting. Again, I want you to follow a pattern here. Who is Yosef? Yosef is the archetype of the Messiah ben Yosef, the Mashiach, who comes to suffer for our sins, right? I like to say, just put it, the reason he went to Egypt in chains is so that the Israelites would not have to. Okay? So anyway, it says here, this word avrech, got to be sure and say it right, is a composite of 2 words. The first is av, which is father, which can also mean counselor or mentor. And the second part is Rach, which means king in Aramaic. So the word could mean father of the king or father king. Another interpretation, it says here in the art scroll Chumash, that the word is a composite of Av, father, in wisdom, though Rach, tender in years. So one idea is that this is a person who is young chronologically, but is like a father in wisdom. I want you to understand that this is what they proclaimed as Yosef was being carried through the streets. Now, Rashi brings down about this particular phrase. I just want to remind you, can I just take a second to remind you that Yosef is the stone the builders rejected. Yosef is the stone that the brothers said, this is not going to be a part of our house. In fact, not only did the brothers say this guy will never be king, you remember what I shared earlier, that they believed that if we allow him to live, it will actually be detrimental to Judaism, to the Jewish way, to the covenant. They actually believed that they had to kill Yosef for the greater good of the nation because he was a problem. They believed him to be a deceiver. They believed his dreams to be part of the occult. Sound familiar? Does it sound familiar? Is this thing on? Can y'all hear me? Does this sound familiar? What did they say about Yeshua? They said, you are a sorcerer, that your miracles are from Beelzebub, chas v'shalom. That's exactly what they said about Yosef. Yosef is the builder, or excuse me, the stone rather, that the builders rejected, and he had a dream. He had a dream. He had a dream, and his dream was that every knee would bow to him and every tongue would confess, and all of Judaism, all of his brothers, I know I keep repeating this point, but it is so crucial to understand. All of Judaism rejected him and said, no way will we bow our knee to you. No way will we ever confess that you're king. That is crazy and loony. In fact, it's so loony, we're going to prove to you how loony it is by the fact that we're going to kill you. I once had a chat with a rabbi, and I won't say where specifically, and I won't say what denomination, but let me just put it like this. My wife and I were going to go on vacation, and the city that we were going to go to vacation in, I found the synagogue nearby where we were going to stay, and we were going to be there over the course of a Shabbat. So I contacted this rabbi via email, explained who I was very upfront, said that I had absolutely no agenda whatsoever in any way, shape, or form. And all I wanted to do was I wanted to be able to come to the shul on Shabbat and daven. And that was it. I would go there, I would daven, my wife would come with me, and we would leave. And all would be well. So the rabbi called me and asked me a few questions. And then he just was overwhelmed that I was Jewish and I believed in this JC guy, supposedly. He didn't understand the difference. But anyway, we got into a discussion that unfortunately became a little bit adversarial, not on my part, but on his part. By the way, he didn't let me come, and that's sad. He wouldn't let me come daven in his shul. But that's okay. When you're confident in what you believe, that wouldn't have been a problem. But when you're not confident in what you believe, it becomes a problem. So he said to me on the phone conversation, he said, how can you believe in this guy when every single rabbi throughout all of history has rejected him, which is, of course, not true in any way, shape, or form. But let's presume that the premise of his statement is accurate, which it is not, but let's presume it is. I said to him, I said, well, every single brother, including the father, rejected Yosef, and it turns out that he was the king. It was shortly thereafter, and then I went on to explain how everybody rejected the Baal Shem Tov, and then he hung up on me. That's a true story, 100% true. So anyway, it says here, and in the words of the Agada, in the Agadic literature, the Tana Rabbi Yehuda expounded the word as follows. The word Avrek refers to Yosef, for he is a father in terms of wisdom, yet tender in years. This is from Rashi, by the way. I don't know if I said that earlier. It says, the Tana Rab Yosef ben Dermaski said to him, how long are you going to corrupt scripture to us? The word Avrech is related to nothing but the word Bir Kayim, that is knees. For everyone shall enter and exit by his authority, as it says, and he appointed him over all the land of Egypt. Now in the footnotes it says, when it's talking here about everybody will enter and exit by his authority, in the footnotes it says every knee will bend their knees to him and acknowledge his authority. So again, we have a pattern here that the one that was rejected by his brothers universally and unequivocally, and the brothers, by the way, as I said earlier, thought the entire time from the moment they sold him to the moment they were bowing before him, during that entire span of time, they believed that their rejection of him was 100% legit, 100% right, 100% accurate, and 100% the will of God. So it says here in the Kehot Chumash, it says, bend the knee. Robert Henry, if you have a question, you can always email it to Sar Shalom Synagogue office, and we will answer it that way if it's something off topic. So it says bend the knee. It says the word for bend the knee, avrek, is cognate with the word used in the Mishnah to describe the method of propagating a vine. Listen to this. So what does it mean to bend the knee? What's another way to look at this? Let's put it that way. Because again, I just want to emphasize for maybe the 50th time that the one brother that was rejected by all the brothers, the one brother they said, we will never, ever in a million, trillion, billion, gazillion years ever bow our knee to you and confess that you're king over us. In fact, we're going to sell you into slavery, you little twerp, and get rid of you, you little goof. We'll never do this. And they sent him off, and they all had a big laugh, and they went to their father and said, yeah, this is the one that you gave this coat to? Yeah. Well, how'd that work out for him? And they went out and smoked cigars and had brandy and celebrated. And then many, many years later, they were bowing their knee to him and confessing his name as king. But what else does it mean to bend the knee? It says the word for bend the knee. By the way, Yeshua is the only messianic figure that was rejected like that. Did you realize that? It says the word for bend the knee, avrek, is cognate with a word used in the Mishnah to describe the method of propagating a vine. Why? By bending it down to the ground in order that it send forth new roots and therefore form a new plant. This is an appropriate name for Yosef, who, as we have seen, functioned as a conduit to bring lofty divine consciousness downward into the material world. Yeshua said, I'm the vine, you're the branches. What is it saying here? It's saying that God used Yosef, who was a vine, to come down, or to rather bring divine consciousness down into the world in order to sprout new vines and produce new fruit. And Yeshua said, I am the vine. God brought him down, as it were, into the universe so that he could be planted here, buried, resurrected to produce new fruit. That's me and you and I, all of us. Now, to this point as well, Yosef was put in a divine chariot. There's an interesting phrase here. It says in verse 46, it says here, verse 45, Pharaoh called Yosef's name Zaphanath Paneah, and he gave him Asnath, daughter of Potiphar, chief of On, for a wife. Thus Yosef emerged in charge of the land of Egypt. Now, in verse 46, now Yosef was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Yosef left Pharaoh's presence. In other words, he went out from Pharaoh's presence and passed through the entire land of Egypt. So Rabbi Monk brings down an insight here. That's right, Dominique. I so want to throw something. Woo! I just want to get up and run around my office a couple of times. But anyway, it says here in verse 46, and he passed through the entire land of Egypt. So Rabbi Monk points out, we've already been told that he's going around in a chariot. Why do we have to now be told that he went out before Pharaoh? So it says this additional detail is of particular importance for the Zohar, which considers every terrestrial event as only the reflection of a metaphysical cause emanating from the higher sphere. It says, there exists, the Zohar tells us, a royal chariot on this earth and a chariot of divine majesty borne by the four archangels in the celestial sphere. This according to Ezekiel 1:16. It says, so if honor was lavished on Yosef to the point that he rode through the whole of Egypt in a royal chariot, emerging from Pharaoh's presence, that is to say, listen to this, this is the point. That is to say, as the herald, say herald, as the herald of the king, and surrounded by the radiance of his glory, then it is because he had the merit of being herald of the king of the universe. In other words, Yosef was a herald of the king of the universe. That's what the Zohar is trying to point out by looking at the mystical meaning of this verse. As it says here, Yosef had announced his message, that is his gospel, to mankind, and wherever he had lived among the pagans, he had proclaimed his name, that is the name of God, and his glory. In other words, what it's pointing out here is that the Torah is teaching us that Yosef was a preacher of the gospel wherever he went. So we're seeing here that the message that we're learning is that the one who was the Messiah to suffer for us, so to speak, that he was known to be a preacher who went around preaching the good news. And it says here specifically, he did it to pagans, which we learn. So this makes sense now when we think about the ministry of Yeshua, whose principal ministry to this point has been to preach the good news to the nations. Those who are afar off and not a people shall be brought near and shall be made a people. So, going back to this name, I mean, how much more of this can you take, really? Such powerful stuff. Again, if Yeshua is not the Messiah, there won't be one. God forbid. Because you just can't get this close and say, yep, that's not it. You just can't. You can't have all the patterns, all of them, every single one of them line up and say, yeah, that wasn't the guy. Zaphanai Panea. You just have to be blind. You'd have to be totally blind. Some people are blind because God blinded them. Some people are blind because they gouged their own eyes out. Zaphanai Panea, revealer of the hidden. Yosef is granted a new name on his nomination to a state position. Now, obviously, the Messiah is known universally by the name Jesus. That is not his name at all. His name is Yeshua. It's Yeshua, not Yahshua, Yahuwah, Shua, Dua, or anything silly like that. It's Yeshua. Okay? And it's frustrating. It's been frustrating for me. When somebody says Jesus to me, it's not necessarily a trigger word. I don't curl up in a fetal position and cry. I don't melt like a snowflake. But it has always bothered me why we changed the name of the Messiah. I mean, is it because Yeshua is difficult to pronounce? I mean, everybody I've ever met can say it. And it's the only, if you think about it, let's just pardon my analogy here. I don't mean to belittle the name of the Messiah and compare it to the name of these other false people. But do we translate the name of Muhammad into another language? Do we translate Hare Krishna or Buddha or whatever numbskulls are out there? Do we translate their names? No, never. I mean, you're speaking French. La chef le ton s'appelle Mohammed. I mean, we don't. You know what I'm saying? We don't translate it, but we translate the name of the true Messiah. Why? Well, there's a reason. So it says this was in accordance with the Egyptian custom at the time. It says here the change of name. Listen to this. The change of name is of importance in the narrative because it will contribute to masking Yosef's identity when his brothers come to Egypt. In other words, the change of name was all part of the divine plan. And now that we live in an age where the name of the Messiah is being revealed, what does that mean about the age in which we live? It must mean that the brothers are coming to Egypt, which means that the Geula, or the redemption, is near at hand. So it says, according to Onkelos and Rashi, his name means the explainer of hidden things. We're going to have to get more into this name tomorrow. We're running out of time, but I want to conclude because there's so much more to share. I wanted to talk about Asnath. We'll have to get to that tomorrow, and that we're going to dive deeper into the name and in its meeting tomorrow. We're going to talk about how God added his name to the name of Yosef. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But let me just conclude here. It says, the explainer of hidden things is an allusion to Yosef's ability to explain dreams. Ramban adds that Pharaoh gave the name in a language which was related to the Egyptians. Rashi brings down that there's nowhere else in the Torah that has this name. There's nothing even similar to it. It's a name that is above all names, if you will. Nowhere in the entire Tanakh is this mentioned again. So it says here, this is the final statement. Listen to this. So we know the name means explainer of hidden things, and we're gonna dive into that more tomorrow. But listen to what the Septuagint and the Coptic versions, how they translate this name. It says, right, I'm reading to you from Rabbi Monk's commentary. It says the Septuagint and the Coptic versions translate this name, Zaphanaf Paneah, as salvation of the world or salvation of the empire. End of our Aliyah. Tomorrow, join us 9:30 Central Standard Time. There's a lot more to discuss. We are out of time, but never out of content. God bless you. Thank you so much for being a part of this program. Without you, I wouldn't be here. So please like this video and share it with all your friends and invite them to be part of the Aliyah day. Shalom and blessings.